the European Union wants to create a big data economy. It wants to see markets for data, transactions in data, commercialization of data. Some people don't like this idea. They talk about the commodification of data, but the Union has a good point. There's probably a lot of economic value locked into data, and it's probably a good idea to allow economic agents to transact, share, and exploit data for value creation purposes. Now, we know from economic theory that markets do not arise out of nowhere, and institutions, the economists say, matter. When economists talk about institutions, they talk about legal rules and standards that can put a little bit of oil in the system, in the mechanics of markets. So one way to think about this idea of trying to promote institutions for data consists in going back to the seminal work of Nobel Prize economist Ronald Coase. And Coase wrote papers saying very interesting things about when markets emerge. And he said essentially that we don't see markets when transaction costs are too high and when entitlements, property rights, are too imperfectly defined by the legal system. And so when we think about what the EU is trying to do, we have to ask ourselves, if the EU wants to create markets for data, where is it that these markets failed to emerge? And maybe the cohesion work can allow us to see through this. Okay, so are there transaction costs that are preventing the emergence of markets for data? Are there imperfectly defined entitlements that are preventing markets for data from arising? And so the European Commission seems to have a way to think about this, and as we heard today at the conference, one key aspect of the strategy consists in trying to harmonize contractual conditions to facilitate trade in data. And as much as this is probably a very good idea, because lack of clarity about contractual terms might increase transaction costs in possible markets for data, I think this requires also the European Union to think about all the other things around which might prevent these markets for data from emerging. And when you look at the amount of regulatory and legislative initiatives that have been adopted in the past 10 to 15 years with impacts on data, it's not clear that all these initiatives go in the direction of reducing transaction costs and rather might go into the direction of increasing transaction costs. I'm going to give you a few examples. We've seen a proliferation of public interest exceptions into transactions for data. We've seen extremely weakly delimited property rights for data. The GDPR is an example. And we've seen a general sentiment of hostility or adversity towards intellectual property rights in the policy structure. So this is not very conducive to reducing transaction costs. So my message is we should probably work towards a consistent coherence and holistic vision of transaction costs and entitlements if we want to see markets for data emerge.